Hi everyone, Miss April here at Kearney Public Library with another online edition of Watercolor Wednesday. Today's theme is going to be summer. With the season winding down, we thought that we would do a project with watermelons and lemons, flowers, just some of the things that kind of make me think of summer. So I'm going to start out with the supply list. I decided to go really basic with this. I have my watercolor palette here. You can find these at about any store, retail store or craft store. Paper towels, pencil, and black markers if you want them. I didn't use any black markers on this project, but sometimes I like to add detail. I used mixed media vellum surface paper. It's smoother than a cold press watercolor paper, so it's just a little bit different surface. You can honestly decide which kind of paper you want to use. This one's a little bit heavier, so it doesn't warp or buckle as much as some of the other papers. And then I just used a piece of cardboard that I had at home. I used a ruler and just a circle stencil to make my own watermelon cutout. I'm sure you could find stencils at the store if that's easier for you. And then I just have a glass jar for my water from home. So I am going to take this project in pieces to show you how I did it. Right. So to start out with my image, I had a blank piece of paper. I used a circle stencil to draw in that initial shape. And then I just used my watermelon cutout to use a pencil and trace out those designs. I just tried to kind of evenly space them. And I'm actually going to start out by showing you how I painted the lemons. Start with the lighter color. I kind of had an idea in my head of how I wanted this to balance out. Use some of your yellow paint. And lemons are kind of an oval shape. I just kept it a little bit wider and more rounded at the bottom and a little bit more of a point. I wasn't too worried about making this super realistic. Just add a little bit of abstract element to it so that you know what it is. And I like to blot my colors just to give it some depth. I used yellow and orange. And I just went kind of along those edges, the bottom and the top, to give it a little bit of shadow. And if you feel like it's too dark, you can blot it. A lemon doesn't really have a whole lot of orange coloring in it. And you can go back in and add some darker elements of the yellow again. And when I'm painting that to give it that round quality, I'm just thinking about following those edges to make it look round. And that's really all there was to it with the lemons. You know, you can decide how light or dark you want your items. And maybe you'll decide you don't want to blot your colors at all. That's the fun thing with watercolor. You can do so many things with it. I'm just going to go ahead and trace my watermelon pattern. I've got some jagged edges, but honestly, I just thought that made it a little more unique. So I've got my watermelon pattern here. And I'm still going to use that blotting technique. I'm going to start with a dark green for the rind of the watermelon. You know, and you can freehand these things if you like, if you're comfortable with drawing. I just kind of wanted to have that guide to make it easier to show what I'm doing. And if you get too much water or too much paint, you know, you're going to be blotting if you choose to do that. And that just gives it a good texture. The other half of the rind, I'm going to use a lighter green. brush strokes aren't very long. I kind of like to use it the way I would a pen or a pencil, just so that I can stay sort of within my guidelines there. And I'm going to blot again. And then I'm going to go back in with that darker green and just kind of blend the two areas together a little bit. So I'm laying my color on a little bit thicker. But again, it just blots and blends really nicely. And I like that outside edge to be a little bit darker, so I might just leave that and not blot it as much. You're going to let that dry. It is important to let your edge dry right along here so that when you're painting your red for the watermelon, the colors don't bleed. I'm just going to leave a little bit of a gap so that my colors don't bleed together too much. Sometimes the tube paint with watercolor can be a little bit more expensive. I really like being able to demonstrate using this simple palette of paint because it's affordable and you can really do a lot of cool things with it. And you might get some of your colors that bleed together or run over. It's better not to look at it as a mistake. You just learn as you go. Somebody told me that watercolor should always be fun when you're doing it. That's very wise because, you know, painting is supposed to be fun. And I'm just going to kind of scrub my color in with my brush. I actually like the texture that it has. When you think about drawing, when you draw simple lines with hatching and cross hatching where they overlap each other, I'm just taking that idea and I'm going to blot again. And I like the way the paper towel kind of softens the look of the paint. And just go back in and add a few darker areas. You can let your color pool in spots. You know, you can move your paper, you can let it run down and bleed into the rest of the paint. And I got a couple of splatters there. I'm going to leave them. I think it kind of looks good. I like splatters on stuff. And I'm going to need to let this dry again for the watermelon seeds. And that's where your black marker or pen comes in. I actually painted my seeds on because I liked the depth of the seeds with that rich black color from the palette. But you can get colors just as dark with a pen. And it's just like a raindrop shape. I think my pen is drying out. I'm going to use a Sharpie here. So once that's dry, you can add your drops in. And again, I liked doing it with the paint. And maybe you just want to put your seeds as dots. I just kind of associate that shape with watermelon seeds, teardrop. Just a little bit bigger one so you can kind of see. There's not a whole lot to it. And that's basically all the steps for the watermelon. I did kind of play around with the Sharpie to see if I liked it with the darker edge, but I kind of liked it light and undefined. And then in the middle, I tried a little bit different technique with that purple flower. And I just did this freehand. Tried to make it like a butterfly shape. Get a little bit more of the paint. And I just kind of made dots and circles to give it more depth. And again, I was just thinking of combining the spots on a butterfly with the idea of flowers. And if you let this dry just a little bit, it'll bleed into the paper more. But then if you blot it, you have your circles there. And then I'm just going to go right over it with the paint again. And you can keep adding water to it, kind of thin it out. And then it leaves your brush strokes and it leaves those spots behind. And then when I did the center of the flower, I actually just let my colors kind of bleed into the other paint and the surface. Leave a little bit of white spaces and a little bit of dark, and when that dries, it just naturally looks like the center of your flower. And you can keep layering your colors. Make one side darker. You can put lines if you prefer. There's all kinds of different variations you can make with flowers. So once I got my flower painted in, I let everything set and dry for a while. You can use a hairdryer on a low or a cool setting. Just don't get it too close to the paper. And if you do, you'll notice that some of your colors will run and bleed out, and sometimes that can be really pretty as well. So once that's dry, I wanted to use this circle area behind that I had originally stenciled. And to balance out what I had, the yellow from the lemons. I wanted to incorporate that, and the green from the rinds. I was thinking about a kiwi fruit, how it can have almost a yellow tone on the inside, and then it gets a darker green. So I'm sticking with that fruit element. And I'm just putting light washes of yellow, light gray, or light green, and dark green. And you can decide if you want your brush strokes to show or if you don't. If you want to blend it out, you can pull your brush through the paint. And I'm going to blot again just because I like the way that looks. And then I actually had my line in there that showed me where I needed to stop that. So I'm just going to kind of draw that in. So that's just kind of an abstract looking kiwi fruit in the background. That took care of all of the elements in the painting. And when I was done with it, I kept looking at it thinking, okay, this has too much white area kind of in between all of the different elements. So I just took this lighter shade of blue. Make sure you get enough water and enough paint. If you overdo the water, you're going to have bigger globs. So I just took my paper, a piece of sketch paper here, or practice paper, and just tap with my brush to make sure my splatters turned out right. And once I knew that I had the right amount of paint, just tap it against your work of art and let that dry, and you are finished.